The assistant coaching situation warrants far greater scrutiny than it has received in the broader discussion surrounding accountability within the organization. When concerns about a head coach's conduct toward the franchise player have been documented on multiple occasions, responsibility cannot rest solely with the head coach. Assistant coaches are integral members of the leadership structure, operating within the same environment and helping shape the culture that exists around the team. The documented interactions involving Caitlin Clark, including sideline confrontations and physical exchanges that have been captured on camera, raise legitimate questions about a coaching culture that appears to have developed without any visible public intervention or correction from organizational leadership. When such incidents become recurring talking points, the issue extends beyond individual behavior and evolves into a broader question of organizational oversight. That is why the focus must also shift toward the front office. The most significant question raised by the season's documented record is whether executive leadership and ownership have provided sufficient oversight and accountability. Decisions regarding the head coach, assistant coaching staff, player development strategies, rotation management, and internal reporting structures all originate from the hiring decisions and organizational direction established by leadership. Ultimately, a coaching staff reflects the standards, values, and philosophy of the organization that employs it. Responsibility for that culture does not stop at the bench. It extends to the executives and ownership group who selected the staff, supported its approach, and continue to retain it throughout the season.
She's done with Stephanie White. Look at this here. This is a player that is mentally done. Stephanie White, congratulations. You have mentally defeated Caitlin Clark. She's done. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification and hype the video. That'd be greatly appreciated as always. This thing is over. I'm letting it be known once again. I'm rooting for Caitlin Clark 100%.
The bench footage showing Caitlin Clark with her head down should not be treated as a psychological assessment or as definitive evidence of her emotional state. Body language is inherently subjective, and responsible analysis requires caution when interpreting isolated visual moments. Drawing firm conclusions about a player's mindset based solely on a brief clip risks moving beyond what the available evidence can reasonably support. What the footage does document, however, is an observable contrast compared to the level of visible energy, engagement, and competitive intensity Clark displayed during many of the team's earlier games this season. That difference is apparent on camera and can be discussed as a matter of observation rather than speculation. The significance of that contrast remains open to interpretation. It may reflect any number of factors, and only Clark herself can accurately explain its meaning should she choose to do so publicly. As a result, assumptions about her emotional or psychological condition should be avoided. At the same time, the existence of noticeable change in outward demeanor is part of the public record and remains relevant to broader discussions surrounding the team's performance, environment, and overall trajectory throughout the season. Acknowledging that difference is reasonable. Assigning a definitive explanation to it is not.
This whole debacle with Stephanie White crashing out on her and benching her. Take a look at this interaction between Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. They're whispering things to each other. This is after the crash out. This is after all of that. You see it. Caitlin Clark's like, yo, we gotta get this idiot the hell out of here. We gotta get this idiot out of here. Aaliyah, I will not be signing my epic deal.
The conversation between Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston on the bench, which took place in the immediate aftermath of the sideline incident and was intentionally shielded from cameras, is a documented event. However, the content of that exchange remains unknown, and responsible analysis should not attempt to reconstruct or speculate about private discussions between players. Any conclusions about what was said would extend beyond the available evidence. What can be stated with confidence is that two of the franchise's cornerstone players chose to engage in a private conversation during a moment characterized by heightened competitive pressure and visible tension. While the substance of the discussion remains undisclosed, the timing and context of the interaction make a noteworthy observation within the broader narrative of the game. It serves as a behavioral data point that may be relevant to understanding the circumstances surrounding that particular moment, even if its precise meaning remains inaccessible to outside observers. The conversation itself belongs solely to Clark and Boston. The surrounding events, however, are part of the public record and can be evaluated through documented footage, game circumstances, and coaching decisions. More importantly, the strategic and rotational choices that influence the outcome of the contest are fully available for objective examination and debate. It is within that framework that a report from Jason Whitlock introduces an additional perspective on the ongoing discussion surrounding rotation management. Whether one agrees with his conclusions or not, the claims presented warrant careful scrutiny and analysis based on verifiable evidence rather than speculation, making them a relevant component of the broader conversation about coaching decisions and team management.
Stephanie White rotated her players like they were playing 3 games in 4 nights. It was actually Portland playing its 3rd game in 4 nights. Stephanie White played 11 players in the first quarter. Wrong coach. Fire that bozo. Fire that bozo. There is no reason to play 11 different players in 1 quarter. This lady wants to be the smartest person in the room. That's the dangerous person to me. I never want to, I don't feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. I damn sure.
One of the most significant points raised in Jason Whitlock's reporting centered on a contextual factor that received far less attention than the box score itself. Portland entered the matchup playing its 3rd game in 4 nights, while Indiana came into the contest with considerably greater rest advantage. That disparity was not only measurable but strategically relevant. Sports performance research has consistently shown that accumulated fatigue can affect execution, decision-making, and overall effectiveness, particularly during the latter stages of games when physical and mental reserves begin to diminish. Viewed through that lens, Stephanie White's decision to deploy 11 different players in the first quarter warrants a level of scrutiny that extends beyond routine rotation discussions. Against an opponent carrying a significant workload disadvantage, the conventional strategic approach would typically be to maximize pressure by extending the minutes of the team's most effective lineup combinations. Sustained continuity forces tired opponents to repeatedly defend the same offensive actions, navigate consistent defensive pressure, and expend valuable energy over longer stretches of play. Over time, that approach can amplify the effects of fatigue and create a competitive advantage. Instead, Indiana's heavy early rotation produced a different result. Frequent substitutions continually altered personnel groupings, offensive rhythms, and defensive matchups, presenting Portland with a variety of looks rather than prolonged, uninterrupted challenge. From an analytical perspective, that approach may have reduced some of the physical and cognitive strain that a fatigued opponent would otherwise be required to endure. This is the central issue underlying the substitution debate. The concern is not simply that momentum was interrupted when Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston were removed at the 6:30 mark of the first quarter. Rather, that decision reflected a broader rotation philosophy that, given the specific circumstances of the game, appeared difficult to reconcile with the objective realities of Portland's physical condition entering the contest. Within that framework, the discussion shifts from a single substitution to a larger question of game management. The data compiled by Chloe Peterson adds another layer to that evaluation by providing measurable outcomes that can be examined alongside the rotation decisions themselves. As a result, what might otherwise be dismissed as a theoretical coaching disagreement becomes a more substantive discussion about strategy, lineup management, and the impact those choices may have had on the competitive outcome.
Right on why Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark subbed at 6:30 mark of the first, after which Portland went on a 13-2 run. Caitlin Clark had 2 points, 3 assists, and a rebound in the first 2.5 minutes of this game and then was subbed out. They were up 8-4. The Portland Fire then went on a 13-2 run. Caitlin Clark got back in the game. It was 17-10. And the game turned into an absolute free fall from there. From the second Caitlin Clark got subbed out, this game...
The sequence of events is well documented. Indiana opened the game with an 8-2 lead, and Caitlin Clark made an immediate impact, recording 2 points, 3 assists, and 1 rebound within the first 2.5 minutes. Portland appeared unsettled enough to call an early timeout as Indiana established control of the game's tempo. What followed became one of the most heavily scrutinized stretches of the contest. At the 6:30 mark of the first quarter, Clark and Aaliyah Boston were removed simultaneously. During the minutes that followed, Portland responded with a 13-2 run. By the time Clark returned to the floor, Indiana had gone from leading comfortably to trailing 17-10, an 11-point swing that occurred entirely during a stretch shaped by coaching rotation decisions. The significance of that sequence becomes even greater when viewed within the broader context of the matchup. Portland entered the game playing its third contest in 4 nights, while Indiana enjoyed a clear rest advantage. On paper, Portland was the team more likely to experience fatigue-related challenges as the game progressed. Against that backdrop, Stephanie White's characterization of the substitution pattern as routine invites legitimate analytical scrutiny. Rotation strategies are often defended through load management principles intended to preserve player energy over the course of a long season. However, that rationale becomes more difficult to justify when facing an opponent already carrying a heavier physical workload. In situations where fatigue is expected to be a competitive factor, conventional strategy often favors sustained pressure. Keeping effective lineup combinations on the floor can force the more fatigued team to defend longer possessions, maintain concentration through repeated actions, and expend additional physical energy, rather than maximizing that potential advantage. Indiana's rotation approach appeared to reduce the continuity of its strongest units and provide Portland with an opportunity to regroup. As a result, the debate extends beyond a single substitution decision. The larger question is whether the rotation philosophy employed during that stretch aligned with the specific conditions of the matchup. The outcome of the sequence, a significant momentum shift in Portland's favor, does not by itself prove causation. However, it does provide a tangible result that invites closer examination of whether Indiana's approach effectively leveraged the advantages it held entering the game or inadvertently allowed its opponent to recover during a critical early stretch.